and welcome back, or welcome to the Just Bloody Post-it podcast. I'm Helen Perry, and this is for anyone who wants to do stuff and make things happen, to create and share brilliantly online, but with healthy boundaries. And it's for you if you're inspired by the stories of people who are doing it in their own perfectly imperfect way. Today, money. I think of myself as someone who's not that great with money. It's a blue job in this house. I am a feminist, but this stuff around women and cash runs deep. Did you know that by the time women retire, they have typically saved about a quarter of what a man has for that time in their life? Our guest this time is on a mission to change this, to help women win at finance. After years in the investment management industry, Davinia Tomlinson founded Rainchq, a membership programme that teaches money, savings, investment and wealth building to women. And to make it happen for as many of us as possible, to spread the word, Davinia's prepared to get right out of her comfort zone and onto Instagram.
People are much happier talking about their sex lives with strangers than they are their finances, apparently. And so on that basis, it's really important that you see someone that you can say, oh, I really like her vibe, she's relatable, she's authentic. Or you can say immediately, no, I really don't like Dav's vibe, I need to, seek out somebody else. But either way, it's important that you put a face to the brand and that people can relate to you, and then you've captivated them. It means that they'll be loyal to you over the long term. But I resisted for a very long time doing video, doing Instagram stories, any of that stuff. I find it cringey.
In my most long haul chat so far, keep listening, you'll see, we cover money mindset, obviously, and niche, how really very super important it is to know who you're talking to when you're marketing, how we must not dumb down our message, our work, wherever we're talking about it. And I urge you to stay tuned for the second half, where Davinia gets into how we, as business owners, freelancers, own bosses, should be measuring the value of the time we spend on social media. Like, we need to know which bits are worth the effort so we can ditch the bits that aren't. Davinia, hello, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Oh, no, thank you for coming. And you are, let's just put it out there, a living example of what happens when you can work towards financial independence and life goals, because where in the world are you?
I am currently in the Caribbean on the beautiful island of St. Kitts.
And you're not there on holiday? Oh, no.
No, I'm not at all. We moved here last December. So, yeah, it's a relocation.
Congratulations. Is that something that's been a long-term goal for you guys?
Yes, absolutely. So it's been 2 years in the making, but I feel like it's lived a lifetime in my heart. This was always something that I wanted to do after many summer holidays and Christmases spent here as a child growing up. So I knew it was my happy place. So about 2 years ago, I decided that it was the place that I wanted to live and work and raise my children and just thrive, really.
So 2 years towards conception and like fulfilling that goal, that's actually, it shows what can happen when you're focused on something, right? Yeah. So, I mean, life must feel amazing. You're on a beautiful island and you've got the business up and running, but I think you probably feel like a lot of other women right now, really relieved that childcare is happening again so that we can focus on our businesses.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I mean, I have so much to say about childcare, not just the cost of it, but also the associated, just the labour and the emotional costs that come with it, and the vast majority of which are borne by women. So yes, huge sigh of relief for all of my friends, and even for myself, having lived through lockdown in London for the best part of a year last year.
Tell us about Rainchq. What's in the title? What does the project mean to you?
So it's so funny. I feel like Rainchq is my third child. I always said, I've got 2 daughters. I'm done now. I'm closed for business. But Rainchq is my third child. And really the name Rainchq is designed to it's a bit of a play on words, and it's designed to evoke this sense of banking your checks for a rainy day. And it's really important that as women, especially, that we think about, if not our financial independence, but certainly our financial resilience in the midst of all of the challenges that we face financially. And I'm always very sensitive to not, constantly, beat this dead donkey about, the gender pay gap, the gender investing gap, the gender pensions gap, because I think, sometimes these things, you can feel so overwhelmed and so beleaguered by this terrible data that we face. And it can force you into a position of freezing where we do nothing at all about our finances. And so what I try to do is strike the balance through Rainchq of highlighting some of the financial challenges we face, but also emphasizing, putting a disproportionate amount of focus on what is within our gift to control and some of the money moves that we can make to improve our financial situations.
What is the root of this gap for you? Like, where do you see it start, and how do we begin to unpick this totally different relationship that we have with our finances that men seem to?
I think there are a couple of things. I think societally we are conditioned and socialized, growing up to believe, as young women, any conversation about money is viewed as unladylike or vulgar. That's certainly an experience that I have had. And even, working within the world of finance, you are either, you can imagine, this stereotypical ice maidens, the real power woman in finance, and who is viewed very negatively for speaking up for herself, for commanding her worth, things that are, just considered to be normal for the average man doing an equivalent thing. He certainly wouldn't be tarred with the same brush. And you see those individuals, if you think about, I started on a graduate scheme at one of the world's largest asset managers, and there were 10 of us on that program. And I bet you, if you were to look at the trajectory from a career perspective of the 3 women that were on the program versus the guys, whereas ours would have been, quite a bit spiky, theirs is probably a straight line upwards. Exactly, generally, where they haven't had to confront the same kinds of stigma and pressures socially from people when they, when they are unapologetic in their pursuit of wealth. And they don't have to explain that, I want to be wealthy because I want to support my family, or I want to have children, or I want to buy. They don't have to explain at all. Because they are men, it's just assumed that it's perfectly acceptable for them to want to be wealthy. So I think society, that conditioning plays a big part, and a large part of that comes from the family. So what you are trained to believe at home, and I talk all the time through Rainchq about money scripts, and some of those inherited beliefs that we have, and the relationship, or how that influences our relationship with money when we become adults. So I think that combination, combined with, as women, you hear all the time about imposter syndrome, for example, and I think again it can become this huge generalization, because there are lots of women that I know, real high flyers, well-educated, professionals, powerhouses. And I think to myself, I don't know anybody that really suffers from imposter syndrome. The reality is that in their, individual fields, when they potentially speak up, or when they have sought to command their worth and negotiate a pay increase, the reception that they get when they have those conversations is quite negative. And so what will happen with anyone, whether you're a man or a woman, if you are continually coming up against negativity or resistance when you try to assert yourself in any way, of course you're going to retreat. That's human nature. I don't think that's a uniquely female conundrum. And so it's important that we think about the language that we use and how we talk to ourselves, how we refer to women in our relationship with money, because lots of these things can seep into our consciousness, and you start to believe that they are your problem versus a problem that you've inherited or absorbed from elsewhere. So I always stress to women, you have all of the ingredients to be a real financial badass. You don't need to worry about imposter syndrome, or there are all of these gaps that exist, but you have the tools to be able to resolve that yourself. And I think that's really important.
Presumably you're trying to just rewrite the messaging around money. And how do you start to do that with your social media posts and content? How do you talk to your team about that? Where do you begin with trying to access and get the attention of people who are resistant to this kind of stuff?
I mean, it really starts with knowing who we want to speak to in the first place. And, when you think about Instagram, which is our primary platform from a social media perspective, obviously women are the biggest user on Instagram, but there are, so many different segments and women of all ages that are on there. And so we are very specific with the kind of women that we're talking to. And so then that's almost borne out in the content. So of course we want the content to be accessible to and useful for all types of women. But it's really important that the specific woman that we're talking to knows that we're speaking to her and will take action as a result of what we're telling her. And so when we can see that in the DMs or the emails that we receive from people who have been triggered by something that they might have seen on one of the posts. And that's the most gratifying thing, knowing that it's having an impact. But I think from my perspective, the thing that I say to my team is what we want to do is not infantilize anyone. It's really important that we at no point attempt to reduce things down to the lowest common denominator when we're talking about personal finance. Rainchq is unapologetically about helping women build sustainable long-term wealth. And it's really important. I mean, we only changed that language in the last 6 months because I recognized that when I was originally talking about Rainchq helping women take control of their financial futures, there are a number of different ways that that might manifest itself. But what it was doing was shying away from the very specific objective that we had. And I think being specific and being precise is really powerful in helping you to funnel out the people that you're potentially not speaking to. And so in that kind of being quite vague and quite general, I guess on the one hand, you think, well, I'm trying to appeal to everyone, but then you end up appealing to nobody at all. So it was important to me to start talking about, we are trying to build wealth and we are trying to build it over the long term and we are trying to build it in such a way that it lasts. And so that language is really important. The words that we use to convey that are important. So we try to make sure that we're repeating that message consistently. And I remember in the early days of Rainchq when it was just me and I was trying to do all the social media and everything myself, because, you can get into this, the realm of going, well, I said that yesterday or I said that last week. I'm not going to say it again now because people must be fed up. And it was only when I started working with someone who now manages the social media and she was like, Dav, if you say it every day, somebody that's really attuned to what you're saying will finally think, I better do something about that. But the vast majority of people won't have seen it yesterday. They might have seen the image and they'll go, oh, that's good. And they'll like it and they'll move on, but they won't necessarily have read the caption. So it really is important that across all media, you were saying the same thing over and over. And that was something that it took me a long time to learn because I just had this inner worry that I was boring people to tears with the same messages. The other thing is kind of content planning and thinking, how can we be aligned with other things, other issues that are happening, generally on the UK calendar, on a global calendar. So equal pay day, for example, which in contrast to, what the name suggests is the point at which women stop being paid in the year for the same labour. So basically you end up working a third of the year for free as a result of this gender pay gap. So being attuned to things like that means that we can craft content around these milestones that will catch hold and will mean that people might be more likely to share content, for example. So, making sure that we're planning in that way is really, really powerful. I guess the other thing that, again, I very reluctantly had to do was to be visible as a person.
How have you found that? Because I know that you understand marketing. I know that's work that you've done in the past. Selling for someone else is like easy peasy, let me at it. But when you have to do it for yourself and you have to step out there, it's not your natural happy place.
No. Oh my gosh, I find it so cringy, Helen. And you know what's funny? Like I was obsessed from day one that Rainchq shouldn't be a faceless brand. That's really, really important to me because, again, putting myself in the guise of what a rainmaker might look like or the qualities that a rainmaker might possess, I thought, well, if I were going to engage with someone that's going to tell me about my finances, that's a relationship that has to be built on trust. People are much happier talking about their sex lives with strangers than they are their finances, apparently. And so on that basis, it's really important that you see someone that you can say, oh, I really like her. I like her vibe. She's relatable. She's authentic. Or you can say immediately, no, I really don't like Dav's vibe. I need to, seek out somebody else. But either way, it's important that you put a face to the brand and that people can relate to you and then you've captivated them. It means that they'll be loyal to you over the long term. But I resisted for a very long time doing video, doing Instagram stories, any of that stuff. I find it cringy. I have to remind myself even now every week, my social media person will say, Dav, you really got to get on camera. You've got to do a story or you've got to do a video. And she has to give me these pep talks and just say, well, just say this, say that. It will last 1 minute. Put it out there and then I'll post it for you. You don't even need to think about it. Don't log on. Just don't log on. I will do all the rest. But it really is important. It's one of the most powerful things that you can do. And it's something that you do excellently. I mean, I really, watching your posts and seeing how relatable you are and fun and perky and quirky, all of the things.
That's really kind, but I think it's really important for you to say that you find it cringy and for me to say, I probably don't find it cringy now, but I definitely did 2 or 3 years ago. I mean, there are literally no photographs of me in existence between my wedding which was 15 years ago and about 3 years ago when I really got into, trying to make something happen for myself on Instagram, it's not something that has to feel natural. You can change that narrative as well, and you can become comfortable with just getting out there and saying your thing, because the alternative is that actually maybe something's not going to happen. Like, you want to reach those women, and that's a bigger driving force than the cringe, I guess.
Yes. And that's the thing that I have to remind myself. You're spot on, and that's very much the message that I receive from my peers, other female entrepreneurs, when I say to them, oh gosh, it's really awful. Oh, I've had to do this video. And, the overriding feeling is the greater good is that I want to reach these women. And if they don't see me and they just see these posts, I could be a man pretending to run this account and pretending to be by women for women. I could be anybody at all. And so it's really important that I'm able to present this face of relatability.
And we find a way, and you find a way. Somebody gives you a kick up the butt, you do it. Then they have to give you another kick. And you know what? Sometimes things aren't our favourite part of our work, but it has to happen. I'm really interested to talk to you kind of on behalf of myself and other founders, small business people, freelancers, all the kind of people that I work with, and actually probably I imagine make up, a lot of your audience as well. I tell people to go onto social media and promote their business and engage with other people and whatnot. But there's this other side of it. You can get sucked into spending a lot of time on social media, calling it work, thinking it's part of your work. Is it always? Not really. How do you balance the kind of it being necessary to power part of your business versus is this a good use of my time? How does that sit for you?
Well, you'll be unsurprised to hear that I'm all over the numbers. So any analytics, any data that can let me know where I'm getting customers from, where we're getting the vast majority of our traffic from. Is it from Google? People just Googling up female finance expert, or is it people that are following us on Instagram? Is it the newsletter? And when we look at, our overall kind of marketing mix of different activity that we enter into, the vast majority of people that will become Rainchq customers and become Rainmakers come from email marketing. I mean, that's just the unequivocal truth. And I think that's probably it's probably fair to say for lots of small businesses, once you've developed that rapport with people via email, when they see you dropping into their inbox, it makes them feel good that they're like, oh, I'm going to take time to read this email from Dav because I know it's going to be something that will be useful for me or give me a nice change of scene. But what we see with Instagram, though, is that it really is powerful in helping, exactly as we've just described, to put that face to the brand and to promote that visibility really instantly. So it can feel, I treat it almost as, when it's that kind of sugar high, that sugar rush, you have that quick fix. But then when you need something that's going to be a bit more nourishing and longer lasting, then we use our email to kind of develop the conversation to, I always encourage people to email me if they have any questions or if what I've emailed them resonates. And through that, I'm able to kind of gauge, how is that message landing? What are the open rates? What are the click-throughs? So I use one to fuel the other. For me, I think with my social media usage, I turned a corner, and it was the point at which I appointed someone to manage social media where I realized it was becoming a massive drain on my time and resources. And I had to be realistic about, exactly as you say, I had to be realistic about whether it was a good use of my time, because it was easy to trick my brain into believing that it was about followers and it was about likes and it was about, all that kind of stuff. Not realizing that, there are people with perhaps even half the number of followers that Rainchq has today, which is not a huge number, but maybe half the number of Rainchq followers, and they're running thriving, successful businesses. So I had to really readjust my brain to, Dav, what are you doing? Why are we trying to pursue followers that could be from anywhere that might not even necessarily be the ideal rainmaker? And then these individuals won't necessarily convert. So you spend a disproportionate amount of your energy on something that is not going to generate revenue. And so once I had that kind of awakening about 18 months ago, everything changed. And so I got somebody on board to manage the social media accounts. We content plan. So I'm not having to be in there every day and go, oh gosh, what should a post be today? What should I post tomorrow? In terms of us kind of, going onto other accounts and engaging and commenting and that kind of thing, that's something that I can do, when I've got 20 minutes spare, and I'm very disciplined about when I'm going on there to do that engagement, but I don't obsess over it. And I know that there are lots of different hacks and things. Some of them, I will follow, but I want to do it in a way that's authentic. So if I see you, for example, pop up on my feed, I'm like, I'm going to listen to this video because Helen's going to tell me something that I want to hear. And anyway, I like watching her, and she wears red lipstick. I like watching her. But then I'm not going to follow all of the female focused finance accounts, for example, and feel that I'm compelled to comment because we are competitors or because we're in the same space. It feels inauthentic to me. To be quite frank, I get fed up of looking at the same posts over and over. Like, I'm in this space. I don't want to follow a load of other people that are also in the same space and pretend that that I've learned something new, because we're doing the same kinds of thing. So I really think it's important that you're clear on what you are trying to achieve, and know that social media is just one channel of many. So you need to make sure that they are all integrated.
Brilliantly helpful, Dav, especially that stuff about actually knowing where your business is coming from, and then acting on it rather than acting on the compulsions that that an app like Instagram can, it's just like, gotta keep going. And it's like, hang on a minute, I've got a paying customer that needs some attention from me here. Just to touch on like what you consume on social, how much do you feel that social media feeds into women's less healthy spending habits, less healthy relationship with money? Is that something that you give thought to?
Yeah. And especially during lockdown, I think, one of the trends that we observed, within the Rainmaker community and elsewhere from people that are not necessarily customers but who were DMing or leaving comments, was that, we saw this kind of anecdotal rise in emotional spending. So people kind of, we lost the ability to go out, to socialize, to spend our time in other ways than just being glued behind our computer for our day jobs on Zoom continually. And then all of our social activities suddenly became centered around our phone as well. And so all we had to do was, scroll incessantly, all day long. It's the first thing that lots of us were doing as soon as we woke up, and it was the last thing lots of us were doing before we went to bed. And companies were aware of that. I mean, ultimately, they're there to entice us to buy things. And I think what was happening is that people were being enticed, perhaps as a result of some of the influencers that they might have been following. But, I don't necessarily blame influencers. It's a career, and, that's their line of work. But we were being enticed to buy things that we couldn't even use. We weren't necessarily in a position to use because we couldn't go outside. And this is something that I think extends outside of even just the lockdown scenario, where you might tap into a reality that is ultimately contrived, because it's contrived to have you, that's what advertising is. It's not just something that's unique to influencers. Ultimately, they are personal advertisers, if you like. But definitely this, this feeling that, okay, we felt anxious, we missed our family and friends, we were vulnerable, lots of us were shielding. And so the one thing that was giving us comfort was having those packages turn up. You'd feel quite excited that if you had a delivery, that was, and even just to see the postman, dropping the parcel off, you would feel quite, you have that momentary high. So definitely, I think that there is a real risk that social, if not managed effectively, if there is indiscipline around its usage, can be quite damaging. That said, I think, overwhelmingly, it can really be a force for good. It can be a force for good in helping you to connect with other people. There are people that I have now met that I consider to be, really, either firm friends or a really powerful part of my professional network. And I have met them through the power of social media. And there are also, as a small business owner, there are opportunities that come as a result of being on there. So I think it really is just about taking a step back and reflecting on all aspects of your life and establishing what discipline is required in order for you to feel good and to feel peace.
Talk about small businesses. Last of all, it doesn't surprise me that tons and tons of the women that I'm connected with are drawn to the appeal of running their own business, of being their own boss, of not answering to anybody, about getting out of this system that seems to make us feel crap, that doesn't fit around, the other things in our lives. But running your own business or starting your own project is a hard thing, as you're doing it, What advice would you give to somebody who's at the early stages of a project they'd love to get off the ground?
The one thing that was really powerful for me was surrounding myself with other entrepreneurs at the same level I was at in terms of my journey as an entrepreneur, but also women that were at the next stage and the stage after that, so that I could see, particularly when I was struggling, I could see those women who were inspiring to me and who were very generous with their time in kind of informally coaching, and, people that I could reach out to if I had a question. I really think it's such a massive help, especially when you're just starting out and you perhaps, if you might have come from the corporate world, or, whatever your background has been. And if you don't have those networks already in place, then it can feel like you're floundering, or like, you're by yourself. And, I think you touched on this earlier, when you come from having a team to suddenly being a team of one. That's really hard. So I think my best advice would be to join one of the many flourishing female entrepreneurship networks, or just general entrepreneurship networks. Find your tribe, because they will really make a difference in not just your success, but how good you feel about the journey, because it really is hard. The other thing that I would do is, I would say is, when you get to a point at which you're able to do so, don't be afraid to pay for help. And this was something that, I had to learn very early in my personal life, so, shortly after I got married, and realizing, after years of living by myself in London, I had a very active social life. I only had to think about myself, didn't have children. It was amazing. And then suddenly you're thrust into this environment where you're having to coexist alongside another person. I was like, oh my God, this is a total nightmare. But I resisted for a very long time, getting a cleaner even. Now, I know for lots of people...
do you know what, though? It's a relationship saver. Who needs to be arguing about who's doing the loo?
Yeah, like just invest in yourself. And so if it costs you, if you can get a cleaner for like a couple of hours a month, and it will help to free up your time to do something else, there is an opportunity cost to our time, right? So it's important that you're thinking, where is my time best spent? So I guess learning that lesson early on in my personal life meant that when it came to a business context, I was able to say, at the point at which I needed help, I was able to say, right, I need to get a social media person on board, because this is overwhelming for me now. And I really don't want to spend my time on social media, because I find it's anxiety inducing quite often for me. And then getting somebody that might be able to assist you with admin or CRM, whatever it is, the point at which you're able to do so, don't be afraid to pay for help. Like, you're not saving any money.
And you're spending hours doing something it's not your thing. It's not your skill set. And it could take somebody else could do it in 45 minutes. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly.
You're killing yourself, wasting your weekend, whatever it might be that you're doing. Yeah, I've been there, done that. You've been so generous with your time and expertise. How can we engage with Rainchq if we would like to go on that journey with you?
Yes. So the first thing, of course, is to follow us on Instagram, which, as I say, is our primary social media channel. But sign up to our mailing list. So it's at Rainchq, www.rainchq.com. We send out weekly newsletters with money tips, with news and views, and hopefully inspiring messages that can give you a real boost and a pep talk for your week.
Thank you so much. That was such an interesting chat. Thank you. I loved it.
Thank you.
I think that what Davinia has that will make Rainchq work is clarity, one of my favourite words. She is crystal clear about who her customer is and going after them unapologetically. Forget about the other people. There's also that clarity about what works for her and her business, because she looks at the data and she knows, go and speak to successful people. This is something that they do. So if this kind of chat is your kind of thing, do you get my emails? Every Friday, I send out a newsletter called The Switch. It's designed especially for people like us. It's full of recommendations for good things like podcasts and thoughts about how to do digital marketing better. And it's how you'll be the first to know about courses and workshops and things I've got coming up. If you go to my website, Google Helen Perry and put your details into the pop-up box, you can't miss it, you'll get it next Friday. Goodbye for now, and thank you always for listening. We're nearly at the end of the first series, just a few more to go. Can't believe it. I'll see you next time. Bye.